Koto. Kohana aho. Welcome to the Using Slicing Pie method session. This is me on one of my seaweed scouting missions. I'm a Korean adoptee from America, and I migrated to New Zealand from Los Angeles in 2008. I moved for a variety of reasons, notwithstanding, fires in Los Angeles and Republicans and things of that nature. And I'm a working mom to an 8-year-old girl, and I run a consultancy called Popcorn Innovation. And Popcorn aims to accelerate the movement towards the decarbonization and climate tech sector by encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship within the community space. Moving to New Zealand, one of the best decisions I ever made. I really believe it is the land of milk and honey because they literally produce a lot of Manuka honey and export a lot of milk. But the metaphor there stands true for me. It is a glorious land that I think has a lot of opportunity. It is wealthy, it's knowledgeable, it's got a lot of things going for it in itself, but what it's lacking is a bit of the cooperation frameworks that would be helpful to actually create momentum within organizations or within new businesses to create a sustainable business. So when I first moved here, there weren't a lot of work opportunities. So I kind of, for me anyway, I'm an engineer by kind of training. And for the first 10 years of my life, I worked in manufacturing businesses that did products, more like consumer products or engineering type products. And in New Zealand, there's not a lot of huge manufacturing companies outside of the food industry. So I really kind of had to get used to this idea of being an entrepreneur, although I have always been interested in my life. So yeah, that's why I was interested to know where you guys are all on your path towards business ownership. So in this presentation, I'll kind of run through the slicing pie method and why I think we should use it. I'll kind of like go into more of a description of the nitty-gritty ins and outs, and then show you a couple examples of how it might work in like the actual calculations. And then we'll discuss kind of the impact adjustments. So this methodology is originally designed for businesses, for-profit businesses, but obviously, I believe it can be adapted for social enterprise or people that are looking for models that have impact or purpose. I was given my first copy of Slicing Pie when I was a resident at the Biz Dojo on K Road. And it's honestly changed my life, really. It's one of the best tools that I've found to effectively kind of generate the momentum for businesses. And it's not my system. It was written by a guy from the States. I think he was he's an entrepreneur and also a professor. He teaches entrepreneurship on the East Coast, named Mike Moyer. And yeah, as Jer has described, it's a fair equity system to share ownership in early stage venture so that you can actually move ahead in the business to actually grow the business. I have used this on 2 other adventures. One is Odox Eye Care, which was making optical kind of equipment for mobile devices in order to increase access for diagnostic eye exams. And another one that I've been working on the past few years under different names, but now it's called the Seaweed Initiative. In both these instances, I employed the system and it worked really well to kind of bridge. Then I know from NZTE, my advisor there, that a lot of New Zealand startups are using Slicing Pie in their employee share option programs. So I'm not the only one out there using it. The New Zealand tech ecosystem has kind of mentioned that people are looking for advice and on people that have used this system. So I know there's definitely people out there in New Zealand that believe in the system. And also, I emailed Mike Moyer to ask if people are using it on social enterprise, and he said definitely there are. So it's relatively early, but has been validated by not just me. So, and I will start before I go into this in more detail with a disclaimer. So if anything in this, and Mike Moyer discusses this in his website, he says, if it sounds like legal advice, it's not. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a certified advisor, I'm a grunt. A grunt being a person that works without pay necessarily, or works on something that they believe in exchange for non-financial returns. That is somebody who it describes a co-founder in the business and or that early startup team.
Hello, my name is Mike Moyer. I'm the author and inventor of Slicing Pie. If you're a startup founder or plan on being a startup founder sometime in the future, I'm going to show you something today that will change the way you think about equity forever. Slicing Pie is a universal, one-size-fits-all solution for the allocation and recovery of equity in early stage of bootstrap startups. In a startup company, equity equals rewards. A person's share of the rewards should always equal that person's share of the at-risk contributions. Let me show you what I mean. Pretend a startup is a game of blackjack. Two founders, Ty and Daisy, decide to go in 50-50. Ty puts down $1 and Daisy puts down $1. Next, the dealer deals. He deals an ace, he deals another ace. Ty and Daisy weren't expecting to have two aces, but they decide they want to take advantage of this new opportunity and split the aces and double down. Let's split the aces. The problem is Ty's out of money, but Daisy is not. So Daisy puts $2 more down there. She bets another $1 and another one. The 50-50 split doesn't seem fair anymore. After all, Daisy plays 75% of the bet and Ty only plays 25%. In this example, Daisy deserves 75% of the equity and Ty deserves 25% of the equity. A 75-25 split more accurately reflects each player's at-risk contribution. Startups are the same thing. When someone contributes to a startup, they're placing a bet on the future winnings of that startup. The future winnings of a startup include the share of the profits or the proceeds when the company sells. But participants in a startup company bet more than just cash. Cash is common in our example, but another common contribution is time, ideas, relationships that turn into sales or investors, personal credit and loans, facilities like warehouse or office space, supplies, equipment and machinery. All these things are things people bet on a startup company. The value of each person's bet is based on the fair market value of their contribution. Some people bet more than others. The guy on the left has put a lot of cash in, and some people bet different contributions than others. The guy on the right has put a lot of time in, and sometimes new people make bets. This team has added a new person who's dedicated a lot of time, and another person who dedicated time and brought some important relationships to the table. To make sense of it all, Slicing Pie converts all contributions to a standardized unit. It's called a slice. A slice is a fictional unit of at-risk contribution. That means all kinds of contributions can be converted into a standardized unit that will help split the equity, which means at any given time, a person's percent share of the ownership should equal their slices over all the slices. This is a simple formula that creates a perfect split. I've written a number of books about this topic that are available in a variety of languages. You can find software to help you manage your split here at slicingpie.com. The Slicing Pie formula is the fairest way to split equity on the entire planet.
What that is describing is, let's say Hillary and Barack start a business, and Hillary's got more time than Barack. Like maybe she's got 20 hours a week. Barack's only got 10 hours a week, and they start working and agree to use Slicing Pie. At the end of the first month, Hillary has put in, let's say, 80 hours. Barack's put in 40 hours. They would they would multiply their hours by the rate that they would charge out at. Let's just use for this example, $100 an hour. And Hillary would have $8,000 of pie, and Barack would have $4,000 of pie. And if they were charging out at the same rate. And then they would add up their two and they, divide by their total contribution, which would have been 12,000, and that would be kind of their initial contribution to the venture. They would potentially add over time other people that wanted to come in and contribute different things than just them, and then it would be a moving kind of like split ownership. So it's dynamic equity split, as they call it. That's just the basic overview of how it might work. And I would say though that this is covering an equity split. It's not covering so many other aspects of starting a venture, which would include things like other governance things and alignment with your co-founders. 60% of startups fail due to co-founder disputes. This helps with one aspect of the disputes area, but it's not all of them. So there's other things in your library, your startup library, other than Slicing Pie, but I do suggest that you read the book if you can. It's pretty small. It's on Kindle if you really want to download it and kind of get into the nitty-gritty. This will just give you an overview of whether you want to do that or not. The theoretical ownership on time or on pi is generally for time is 2 times the agreed value. So if I said it was $100 an hour, technically for the book, they suggest using a 2 times factor to account for risk, because there's a chance that you might never see that money or get paid, or that the whole thing could blow up. So you are awarded 2 times the value of the time that you put in as pi. And with money and cash that you initially put in, the book suggests you use a 4 times factor. So if I put in $10,000, it's actually equating to $40,000 of pi. That's again, because cash is so important in early stage venture. This isn't necessarily investment. This is, well, it is investment. All of it is investment, time investment, money investment. But if you're going to ask for like $1 million raise, you pretty much what they call baking the pie, which is you kind of solidify your founder shares, and then you move into kind of another realm of which Slicing Pie doesn't cover. But as I said, it's a methodology that can be adjusted as well for every group, but this is kind of what they see as a good measure of contributions for commercial venture or people that are looking at starting businesses. Equipment 2 times the fair market value. Now relationships, that also came up in the previous session, that was quite important, especially for social enterprise. And what they say in the book is that relationships really should be accounted for as a commission based on if you introduce someone to someone else that ends up, funding or, actually buying some of the product, that should be calculated as a commission of the amount that's raised or given. So and it is hard to sometimes account for that. And I also suggest that in some instances, you inviting people to your venture at similar level to you, and that you all have relationships and things like that. So not to get too caught up in the actual accounting for relationships. I didn't really use that in my Slicing Pie method previously, but it is a factor for, I think, quite a significant factor for a lot of community-based projects. And then intellectual property as well. They cover that more in detail in the book, but it's more like patents and things like that, that if you had spent money on developing a patent and then it comes into the business, then it would be accounted for. With traditional investment, you really have to wait to kind of grow the business. You have to find some funding to hire someone to help you build a platform, help you build a product. And the thing is, this really allows you to kind of bypass that funding stage potentially. And, angel investors who usually do that round after friends and family, they decide who wins and who loses. And most of the time, they decide that based on how much financial return that they can get on the business. When you're talking about something impactful, there's less of that incentive. And so that's why a lot of those businesses don't raise traditionally. So with Slicing Pie, you can really get a lot further with people that are passionate about your product or about your business and or social project, and they can start participating right away. You're basically monetizing or using time as that investment, and encourages participation by people who are not traditionally investors. They're not, they may not be, the people that are qualified at, with a net worth of over, I don't know how much millions that it is now, but it's generally quite a few people, not very many people that qualify to be those traditional investors. So yeah, I think it opens it up to allow more of society to participate in deciding which projects actually are worth pursuing and not. So in some instances, like crowdfunding. For ODocs, when we built this project, it was like 6 months after we decided to use Slicing Pie. It was like we had been funded. So everyone threw in as much as they could on the project that they had, they had to pay bills, so they might have worked a part-time job or something. And then the rest of the time they were actually using on building our product, selling our pitch, our business, finding customers. 6 months time, we built like 2 prototypes, came up with the branding of the business, websites, all that. We had programmers, graphic designers, product designer, engineer, and 3 doctors participating in this program. So it really worked as like, it worked to build that momentum. We ended up at this like awards show, and we were being presented an award by Steve Wozniak. It was also Richard Branson on some of the judging committee. And yet Hong and I had to share a hotel room because we had no money to have separate hotel rooms because, we're not together or anything. But it was just, and some of the other winners had like sports cars and stuff like they were showing off. And I was like, oh, but it really solidified to me that the method could work. So, and for New Zealand, especially, there's a lot of people in this community that are interested in solving, the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN. That social capital should be able to be utilized. Thousands and thousands of people marched at the climate march, for instance, 2 years ago, and yet, why aren't there a lot of those businesses or solutions kind of just coming out the walls if 80,000 people were really that passionate about it? The other thing is New Zealand's got heaps of housing equity. So, it's a very unique place, but most people, if they own a house or if they've owned a house for many years, they should be able to pull some of that out, in the form of, revolving credit or whatever, and apply some of that towards some of these projects. And, because the investment market is smaller, in comparison to Australia and the US, we really have to look at these kinds of different methods of investment, because a lot of the investment does go towards housing, but just because a lot of professional investors do that doesn't mean other people who have houses already can't go and decide to do that with their equity. So Slicing Pie has a website, and there's a lot of resources on it. When I started using it, they had like a template on Microsoft Excel, and so that's what I used. And this is just a kind of like a snapshot, but I was going to actually try to show you how it worked in the startup that we were in, ODocs, for instance. So there's kind of a regular fund, or a summary page. There's the visual, the graphic. Okay, hold on. Hopefully this doesn't stop my video. And for instance, this is how it would work. Every week I worked on this project, so I can, August, the last week in August, I worked 32.6 hours that week. So everyone's got to count their time in some kind of time tracker like Toggle, or writing down your hours or whatever. And every week I would ask my team, can you just please insert your hours into Slicing Pie, or every month even. Just make sure that and most of the people were contractors and they understood how to do that, and you didn't really have to struggle. And then I would, you basically offset any hours that you were paid, which you might have been paid a small amount to pay your bills, and then you multiply that times your rate. So we chose an $80 an hour, so this is $160 with the risk factor calculated in. And hold on just a second. Yeah, oh, sorry. I gotten paid for the 32 hours, but I worked 144 hours that month. So that was my contribution for the month. It was almost $18,000 of pie. And every month everybody did that. And then over time, you kind of got to see your contribution and how it stacked up compared to everyone else and what it would actually equate to in the end. And this is like this is an outdated, so I've been since diluted quite a bit, but when I was active in the role, I was contributing quite a bit as an interim CEO. The original founder wasn't really participating as much, and we were kind of building. Another designer was contributing with me, so we were almost full time on the project. So that can be kind of the descriptor on how you might account for the time that you're putting in. Any questions so far? No. Okay, hold on. How do I get back to? Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, so effectively the entire value of the business over a year's time kind of grew. That's a theoretical value, but if you think the business is actually going to be worth that at the end of it, then all it means is that your shares, quote unquote shares, which aren't really counted as shares, they're more of a promise of shares, that the worth of those shares would be beyond what you're contributing to it, which is a good thing. You want it to actually be building value in the business. And like I said, what it only is a piece of this whole puzzle. Doesn't necessarily tell you, who should lead, who you shouldn't have on your team, what kind of investors you should pick, how to make those kinds of really hard decisions, and how much hard work that you're going through, and how to juggle your life around this business. So it's one part. There's a chapter that talks about exits for grunts that either exit the business with good cause or bad cause, effectively kind of a way to take back ownership if there was something, for instance, like if someone starts behaving badly and they leave the business, and then they've got all these shares in the business. So some of that will be retracted if it's their fault that they're leaving, versus if someone died and if they were getting terminally ill or something like that, that would be different. So there's those kinds of things that it does cover in the book. And so, yeah, I think for impact startups, there are a few adjustments that could be made to the model. And, a company, a social enterprise, as Jer kind of discusses in that last workshop, sometimes people structure it so that a charity and a business work together to have one brand, and they kind of deliver effectively two different funding streams. One maybe from private investment and or being able to monetize or make money, and then the other maybe coming from funders like grants, and so you kind of work together. So this only really works for companies that have shareholding, but you can have the charity owning some of that company. They can invest in some of that company. They are allowed to do that. You can't invest in a charity, but the charities can hold shares in a business. So you could set it up that the charity owns some of the company. It is an investor in the company. Therefore, you're kind of like rewarding the charity for all of the participation it has in the business. So that's one way you can structure it. And then the other consideration, for a lot of the grunts that joined in are, a lot of them, they're looking for purpose. They're looking for contributing something to a good business that they believe in. But there is that financial return that they are also looking for. And perhaps with some, I've met different kinds of people in projects, and some people don't care really at all about return. They're doing this, as a voluntary effort. And so they might be looking for more like leadership roles or experience or, social capital. And so some of the drivers that other people, you kind of have to take some of that into consideration. and account for if somebody is wanting that, maybe they have some kind of, you have a threshold where you start publishing that their participation in the project, and that's more of a consideration than monetary gain at the end of it. Obviously, the budgets that are described in the book, they say, at what point do you bake the pie? Baking the pie means that you are entering a financing event, or that the business is making enough money that it can actually return profits. And then you move out of the slicing pie model and you kind of set the equity amounts, like on the company's New Zealand website, you kind of write down who's got how much. And then it's kind of locked in, because lawyers are really supposed to be processing paperwork for when that occurs. Up until then, like I said, it's a promise, or it can, for bigger businesses, for instance, for maybe Claire or Jill, they might be looking at apportioning some of their employee share option using this methodology. And then they say, oh, we're going to have an ESOP of 20%, and it's going to be governed by slicing pie. So whoever's coming in and working, and if it's a way to stretch the budget that you've got. I mean, it did work for us every month, I would say. How much do you need this month? And if they had worked 200 hours that month, for instance, or let's say 100 hours that month. I don't want people to think I'm a slave driver or anything. They might say, okay, well, I only need 50 hours paid, and then I would like to put 50 hours into pie, and they'll be incentivized to not take more than they need. So it's a way for them to split their investment, continue to allow the business to go, be vested in the interest, the business's success. And yeah, so if you get $100,000 of funding, you can make that stretch a little bit using this method. And yeah, I mean, the growth model for businesses, social enterprises, generally a bit scaled back from what startups are expected to grow in kind of the commercial sector. They tend to want to grow like, double every 2 to 3 years, which to me is not sustainable. 10 times return on investment, it doesn't seem sustainable to me. And yeah, from a climate perspective, those figures, yeah, I don't think we should try to aim for that. And because the book says when you bake the pie, it should really be for $1 million or more. $1 million of funding in New Zealand is probably, for social enterprises, quite a big ask. So I would consider baking the pie in those instances for less than that. So to your discretion. So this is a fictional animal I came up with. His name is a camel corn. He's a unicorn camel who can weather the desert of funding. And maybe we just need horses, but we need some new vehicles to have sustainable businesses and that make an impact. And I think that this guy could potentially be that model. And maybe, but yeah, I'd love to see hundreds of these coming out of New Zealand, fixing real problems that we have on Earth. And I hope that you guys are with me on that. But the way that this is one way we could potentially generate more camel corns.